Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I'm your host, TheWriter. This is a show where I sit here and regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happened. So we return once more to my high school gaming group, the Clown Shoes Know-Nothings that we were, running episodic games instead of campaigns because our attention spans were not that long, skirting the rules because we didn't know them, and just flying by the seat of our pants. So, if you've been paying attention to the last few episodes, you know quite a bit about a character called Delfnar of the Many Thoughts, the guy with several voices in his head, Hans Ramore, Giorgio, the operator himself, and so on and so forth, all arguing over control of one body. And today's story is all about him, because this was Delfnar's finest hour. Now, once again, we ran up to the guild hall at the start of our game. Choose your character. You know, who do you want to be today for today's one-shot? And I was behind the DM's curtain. So, got my little note card here in case I forget stuff. So we ended up with Delfnar of the Many Thoughts. Jacomus Maximus, who had died, re-rolled a paladin that he called, what was it? It was like Sergeant Light McBride or something like that. And his last name was McBride. So it was Sergeant Light McBride. And so I was like, well, your last character's name was Butt, so I guess this is a upgrade, sort of. But he rolled an imbuement paladin. That is a paladin that can summon weapons from heaven out of the sky or imbue arrows to do holy damage, and more like a support character. He had chainmail and a longsword, but he was mostly there to dish out the holy damage or to imbue other people's weapons with holy damage, because we were running into quite a few evil things in our travels. So this was his response character. After Jacomus Maximus met his untimely end leaping from the Mimic Tower. So let's see. We had Delfnar the Many Thoughts, Sergeant Light McBride, Quinn the Eskimo, who I think was a barbarian or a duelist or something like that, another melee character, and then our haunted ghost armor friend who was wanting to be the guy from Full Metal Alchemist, but that's neither here nor there. So 4 melee fighters, pretty much. No magic around without Yenot, Silver Streak of the East. I was behind the DM's curtain. And no range damage because, again, Rock and Roll Tony, the Ranger, was behind the DM's curtain. So it was all melee fighters, so they stocked up on potions this time around. And so, choose your character. They ended up with these 4 guys in the guild hall, and we spun the little roulette to figure out what we were doing that day, and we come to find out, and I did some preparation beforehand. I spun the wheel before everybody sat down at the table so I would know what the hell I was doing. And they come to find out that apparently a dragon is moving its horde from one location to another with the help of all of its minions. And they go, really? Aren't dragon hordes usually like in mountains or underground, places that can be hollowed out? And they goes, well, this dragon was relatively young when he moved into this particular mountain and didn't know that he was sitting on basically an iron plate, like you see in the Armageddon movie when they land the space lander on the wrong place. Captain America over here landed us on a goddamn iron plate. We can't dig through this. That's the situation this dragon was in. He tried to expand his lair, but could not do it because the rocks and the minerals were too firm for his claws, and magic was too risky because it could have brought the whole mountain down on his head. So he is moving from one end of this mountain range to another, but rather than, take a scoop of gold and move it, and take a scoop of gold and move it, he is bringing all his minions and sellswords, because he's a mature adult by now, it's been some time. He's bringing all his minions and sellswords to move it for him, and he is going to watch over this column as it moves along the road and over a bridge, a rather large bridge that is easily defensible. And they go, gosh, if we could stop that column or that parade that's moving all these valuables, we'd be the richest freaking guys in the region. Nay, the continent. Nay, the planet. Nay, the galaxy. Nay, the universe. I go, shut up. Calm down. So, there is a mobile dragon's horde, and this dragon is going to be bringing up the rear. So if this parade stops, he's going to take wing, move all the way to the front, and kick the shit out of whoever's stopping his minions. And he's got columns of sellswords on either side, so it's like there's 4 of us. How are we going to stop them? The bridge is maybe 500 feet above the water, so it's easy to just knock people off or build a barricade, because the nearest next bridge is like 40, 50 miles away, and they don't want to snake all the way down through this valley to go to the other bridge. So if you can hold this bridge, you can stop them from moving this dragon's horde, take it for yourself, slay the dragon, and be richer, more powerful men for it. And they go, wow, okay, so how many minions are moving this? They go, well, he's got a dozen sellswords, and he's got the guys driving the carts, and he's got the horses, and whatever, the guys that have the ledgers to make sure nothing goes missing, and some guys with bows and arrows like sitting up on the carts, and it's like it totals out to like 50 people. So there's quite a few guys coming, and there's only 4 of you. So what are you gonna do? He's like, gosh, I wish Yenot was here. With his breastplate of command, he could bring in some minions, and we could set this up like tower defense or like Helm's Deep or something, and just build barricades and put guys with crossbows behind them. In fact, why don't we do that? So they go into town, and they just start asking around for guards, for kingsmen, for anybody who's good with a ranged weapon, like a crossbow or a longbow. Said, hey, we'll pay you 20 gold pieces if you come and defend this bridge. There's a dragon's horde on the way, and we'll give you a chunk of it if you come help us take it. And they go, really? What dragon it is? Oh, it's so-and-so, the dragon. I don't remember the dragon's name. It was a red dragon, a fire dragon. And they go, gosh, all right, well, as long as we're only fighting the minions and you guys are going to take care of the dragons, and they roll the diplomacy, and they do the negotiations, and they tally up everybody's wages, and they end up with a handful of guys that know their way around a crossbow. And they're like, okay, this bridge is where they're going to be coming, so don't fuck up. There's going to be a lot of them. So they take all these people out there, and this is basically going to be a pitched battle, something I hadn't done before as a DM and did not know, did not usually go well, because there's 4 players, and there's, a dozen of their guys and 50 of those guys, plus the dragon, so they're going to be spending time waiting for their turn. And I ended up not even rolling damage for them. I was like, okay, this guy shoots. Okay, he hits, that guy dies, and just do that a couple of times and things like that to keep the battle running fast, so that the players felt like they were doing a big part of this. And they go, okay, so what do we do about the bridge? Do we just like sandbag it? Is there a guard tower where you have to pay a toll to go across? Because again, this bridge is like 500 feet above the water. It's perched between 2 hills or 2 mountains, above this giant rushing river with sharp rocks at the bottom and all that kind of stuff. And, Delfnar's kind of stroking his chin, looking down there like, should we set up traps at the bottom to make sure we impale these guys? I could just pick guys up by the shoulders and throw them off. Would they die? Oh, yeah. 500 feet onto flat water, they would die. But this has sharp rocks and stuff at the bottom, so yeah, Delfnar, anybody you throw off this bridge will probably die. You don't have to actually fight them if you don't want to. Just be wary of all the longbowmen and the crossbowmen that are shooting back and forth at each other. This will be a pitched battle when it happens, because there's no other convenient road. And they go, okay, gosh. So, we buy dinner for everybody to make sure their energy is up in tip-top shape, and we buy everybody crossbow bolts and arrows so that nobody runs out, and we're going to set up wooden barricades with spikes on them, and we're going to defend this bridge so that this dragon can't move his horde from A to B without going through us. They go, all right, you've got maybe a day to get up there. So they trek straight up there on their horses, they tie their horses, they set up the barricades. They sandbag one place, so they've got a solid defensive wall that's chest high, so they can shoot their crossbows over it and stuff like that. They're not sure what to expect, but what comes up the road is a series of covered wagons. And of course there's guys, so these mean-looking dudes in leather armor with swords on their hips, looking off into the tree line and looking off over the side in case they get jumped. And of course, as soon as they see the bridge and all the people on it, they start, tugging on each other's sleeves and pointing at you guys. And they go, they're organizing, they're going to come up there. It's like, well, we shoot a volley down at them. There's kind of a little incline to come up to the bridge. We've got the high ground. We shoot down at them with all of our crossbows and stuff like that. And this volley of arrows goes down. It takes out a couple of guys, but, any of the covered wagons that are behind them, it does them no good. And then Light McBright turns to Delfnar and is like, I imbue Delfnar's arrow with holy fire. And Delfnar's like, yes, boom, and he shoots it down over this covered wagon, which immediately catches fire with white flames, and it burns the cover off, exposing this mound of gold and silver and chests. It's just like it got thrown onto this cart. They didn't even try to organize it. They just picked it up by the handful and threw it on this cart. And those poor horses have been pulling it for miles. And he goes, yep, that's them. Another volley, another. So the guys that have been trying to get up the hill hoist their shields, and they start going up to get into melee with our characters and their friends. So this pitched battle erupts, and I figure, I can have fighting in the background and fighting in the foreground, but X number of guys come up to fight the characters so that I'm not rolling 10,000 d20s while they're waiting their turn and tapping their fingers on the table. So they fight 7 or 8 dudes, and it's just a standard fight. Guys with leathers, guys with cold sabers and stuff like that. And Delfnar of the Many Thoughts is slicing through these guys because he's our barbarian. He's got 4 weapons in his pouch. If he sees somebody with thick armor, he'll switch over to a piercing weapon or a blunt weapon to beat him over the head. He's grabbing guys by the armpit and throwing them over the side of the bridge just because he can. And then Delfnar looks at me behind the screen, and I go, what? And he goes, oh, splash. Yeah, there we go. But they cut through these guys, and the guys that are coming with the dragon sword start to realize that something is wrong, and they start cutting through the minions that our players have set up, just with superior firepower. This dragon obviously picked guys that knew what they were doing. The players picked up the local guys at the tavern that could pull a bow back far enough to shoot it. So they are outmatched in the minion department. And another wave of these dragons minions come through, and of course there's the one guy in plate mail with the long sword and the shield who comes to act as the sub boss who comes in, can sling low end fireballs, and our characters are taking some damage, but this melee goes on for a long time, and then finally there's a silence, and no more carts are coming up the road, but they take in the whole dragon's sword that's come so far. And I was like, how much is there? And I roll 5 or 6 digits worth of gold pieces. You can hand off gold to the guys that are still alive and keep the rest, I guess. And they split it amongst themselves oh my god, this is just a small portion of what's coming up the road. Yes! And said, well, while you're distributing your treasures, you notice that there's a guy on horseback at the bottom of the hill who's looking up at you with a spyglass. And they go, it's a scout, shoot him! And Delfnar turns with his longbow and tries to shoot the guy. And I goes, oh, it's too far, Delfnar. You got a -4 or a -6 on that shot. And Delfnar shoots down and misses entirely. And the scout takes off, no doubt to tell the dragon that some assholes have set up shop on the bridge and are taking his stuff. And they go, oh crap, he's going to be coming for us. So they load out their they're fire resist potions that they bought because they're smart and they don't have a magical healer with them, and they wait. And of course, a couple hours later, they hear a dragon's roar go out over the mountain range, and they're like, he's coming right the fuck now, isn't he? And of course, you see a dark shape, just as the sun is setting, a dark shape is coming up over the mountains, over the hills, and it has these great black wings that spread out before it dive bombs down through the mountains, swinging back and forth like a fighter jet. Well, that's anachronistic to say it like that, but swinging back and forth like an eagle, but it's way too big, and its eyes are glowing, and its tail lashes about. It's a great red dragon, and it's pissed, and it's coming right for you. Anyway, how's it approaching the bridge? And I go, profile. It's not coming up the road. So all of your defenses are sideways. And they go, oh shit, we moved the sandbags. And it's like, you could try. You could probably turn those sandbags to glass. Because running a dragon fight, in my opinion, is an art. You have to have the circle strafing. You have to have the tail attacks. You've got to have the breath weapon. They shouldn't just stand in one place and be wailed on by melee characters. So they know I'm about to fuck them up. And they go, what do we do? What do we do? We got to force it down out of the sky. And of course, Delfnar steps up. He's got this big throwing spear. A spear that whenever he throws it will automatically return to the pouch on his back, or the holster, or whatever you want to call that. It's like, throw it out over there. Ah. And he rolls a 20, because of course he does, and it lodges itself in the dragon's shoulder, right where those wing muscles are, and it spirals out of control until it hits the side of the bridge, knocking over most of their embattlements. It takes some damage because they were covered with spikes and wooden embattlements like you would usually see at a castle siege or something. And you go, the dragon has been grounded for the moment, but it's still very much alive and very much pissed. Roll initiative. Oh, and the dragon wins the initiative and sprays the entire bridge with fire breath. I was like, that's like, what, 7d6 worth of fire damage? Your fire damage potions can only cover so much. Your magic ring, Micah the monk, Micah was there too. There was a fifth player, Micah the monk. We've talked about him. But, that ring of fire protection can only cover so much, Micah the monk, along with the potion that you took. So you all take, X amount of fire damage. So they all get pushed down, and behind their barriers and embattlements is like, which one of them is going to be dumb enough to run into melee range with this thing? Because it's holding on to the side of the bridge, and it's probably not going to fly away anytime soon, but, you got that D4 of a cooldown for fire breath before it just roasts them. So, of course, it's, Delfnar's turn next, and he's like, oh, what should I do? And in his head, Hans Remore goes, well, Delfnar, I think you should eat it. And he goes, eat the dragon, Hans Remore? And then Giorgio pops up. Ha 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 ha. I think you should kill it. And he goes, oh. And he kind of glances over at me sideways, like, should he ask about the third person? And he goes, I dial 0 for the operator. And of course, I have to play along. Everybody at the table's giggling. I have to play along. I go, operator. And he goes, operator, what should I do? And the operator goes, we're sorry. Some lines are down right now and are in need of repair. And he goes, oh, damn. She has no advice for me. So Delfnar, almost passes his turn just in thought. And everybody else, runs out from behind the barriers. They're like, we melee into it. We cut up its wings so it can't fly away. Trying to get through this dragon's, what was it, a 25, a 26 armor by the time it reaches that. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it has thick scales and leathery wings, and it's very hard to hit with a melee weapon. So they're rushing in. And Delfnar is turning his character sheet back and forth while this fight is going on. And Delfnar would do this sometimes. He would stop in the middle of a fight to be in thought, because he has so many voices in his head to the detriment of his party because he wouldn't be hitting anything. And he flips a couple of pages, because the character sheet is 2 pages long, and I look over and I see that he's still got his backstory page on the back of his character sheet, and that was just something we threw in at the last second. That when we made a character, you had like 1 page to tell like a detailed backstory, and then if people asked your character questions, you could answer and then point to where that was in your backstory. If you had a special talent or some connections or some friends or a house in the boonies somewhere, you could say, oh, it's here in my backstory. I'm not just making it up. Well, the only thing was we didn't really read each other's backstories because, again, we were clown choosing most of this. So, you would make up your own backstory and you'd think it was cool, but nobody else would care. So I had not read Delfnar's backstory, but apparently he'd been sitting on it for the past 6 or 7 games, because when his turn came back around, he reaches into his bag and he goes, I pull out the repair anything crystal that we got from the Mimic Tower. And I go, what? And he goes, yeah, remember we found that crystal that could repair anything? When we were going through that wizard's tower. And I go, yeah, that's true. And I look over at Quentin, who's Quinn the Eskimo right now, a fighter or a barbarian or something. And I go, Quentin, what were the limitations on that? And he goes, I don't know. I didn't really put any on there. And I go, well, of course you didn't. You fucking fly by the seat of your pants, and you're a terrible DM. And that's a whole nother argument for another day. And I go, well, all right, Delfnar, you've got the repair anything crystal in your hand. What are you going to do with it? He's like, are your weapons broken? Is your armor broken? I don't remember damaging anything of yours. And Delfnar goes, I push my bangs back and I slap the crystal onto my own forehead. And I go, okay, your brain is repairing itself? And I squint at him because I know he's doing something. And Delfnar starts to go into like a fit. He starts like vibrating and convulsing, and he falls back. He has to hold himself up, and he goes, ah. He starts to glow like somebody from freaking Dragon Ball Z. A big fiery aura starts coming up off of his shoulders, off of his head, off of his arms, and he puts his arms out, raising them towards the sky, and the fight almost stops. Like there's a lot of fireworks going on from this half-orc barbarian who doesn't know magic, slaps himself on the forehead with this thing, and then he splits into 4 people. And I go, what? You can't do that. And he goes, it's in my backstory. And he hands me this sheet. And then we blew the lid off of Delfnar of the Many Thoughts. Turns out, Delfnar of the Many Thoughts was not crazy. He was 4 people mushed into one. And I go, who are these people? And I picked up the backstory and I glanced through it. Apparently, Delfnar was the representation of an entire dungeon party mushed into one person after all of them were catastrophically injured. Some weird spell somewhere like screwed them all up, like they were just laying on the ground dying, and somebody else came along with apparently really botched holy magic, and instead of healing them, mushed them all into Delfnar's body. And they were named Hans Ramore, Giorgio, and then an elven lady. I forgot. We're just going to call her the operator. So when Delfnar repaired his own head, he had the essences of these 3 other people. So suddenly there were 3 more party members standing on the bridge. We had Delfnar, the barbarian, Hans Ramore, who was a duelist, Giorgio, who was another barbarian, and the operator, who was an elven priestess. And I go, what the hell just happened? And Delfnar looks over at the rest of his party and goes, go on, say it. And immediately Micah the monk goes, he's the Mighty Morphin Delfnar Rangers. And everybody immediately goes, go, go, Delfnar Rangers! And they go through the whole Power Rangers song, because Delfnar was a Megazord. I don't know what I'm even supposed to do. I can't tell him no because it's too cool. And the repair crystal didn't have any limitations on it, and it was in his backstory. And we examined the paper, like, did he just write this? And they're like, no, the paper was just as old as the rest of his character sheet, and all of those I think Quentin knew, which is why those personalities had such particular names, like Hans Ramori and Giorgio and stuff. And I mean, I pulled the operator in, but Delfnar had a particular name for her, and she was just called the operator. Or did Quentin do that? I forgot. But anyway, Delfnar splits into 4 people, and suddenly, the big pile of weapons that are on his back, because he's got a weapon for every occasion, now all of these new people have weapons to pull out of Delfnar's sack. And so a duelist with a sword, and a priestess with a bow staff, and a freaking barbarian with a great axe and all that stuff, they're all armed, they've all got their own gear, and they're all different people. And I go, Delfnar, do you have character sheets for all these people? And he gives me this shit-eating grin, and he opens his backpack, and he pulls out 3 additional character sheets. And I go, you split yourself into 4 people. And he goes, yeah. And I go, did you plan this? Because you've been running with Delfnar of the Many Thoughts for like 4 months now. Did you plan this from the start? And he goes, yeah. Were you just waiting for a big boss fight? Yeah. And he just keeps grinning wider and wider. And I go, roll initiative, I guess. Roll initiative. And everybody's like, yeah. And he's like, the DM allowed it. Yeah. We doubled the size of our party from well, no, almost, but like from 5 people to 8 people. Now we feel like we stand a better chance against this red dragon. So the fight continues with 3 new adventurers, Hans Ramori, Giorgio, and the elven priestess, the operator, standing in the back healing people. So they basically gang rush this dragon on the side of this bridge and start to push it off. And he's like, well, if it falls off the bridge, it'll just glide away. And Delfnar goes, I'm going to put the dragon in a headlock and ride him all the way down into the river below. And I go, there's sharp rocks down there. You might die. And he goes, I don't care. This is Delfnar's finest hour. And he grabs the dragon around the neck while it's falling off the bridge from its injuries. And he rides it all the way down like a freaking choke slam from heaven itself and splashes into the water. And I go, Delfnar, I guess the dragon's dead. It's too big. It was too big to avoid the sharp rocks, so I guess it's impaled on all the rocks. And then I roll the dice, and everybody goes, and I go, you sink into the water. You don't hit any rocks, but you took this much damage. And he took like a whole shit ton of damage. He had to roll to not pass out from the impact. And he makes it, because of course he does. He's a barbarian. And I go, you've only got like a smidgen of health left, and oh, by the way, you're still wearing like chainmail or plate mail, and you just jumped into a rushing river. You're gonna drown. And, of course, the other 7 party members rush over to the side of the bridge, and they look down, Delfnar, no! And they see the dragon's body is just like impaled, like crucified on all these sharp rocks down below the bridge. So, they get all the XP, and, the column of minions hasn't arrived yet, but they can pick them off when they arrived. But Delfnar has fallen into the river, never to be seen again. And then Delfnar lifts a finger and goes, don't worry, I've got this. And I go, what is it now? And I take his character sheet and I rip off the backstory. And I go, there's nothing in here that says you can hold your breath underwater. And he kind of takes this backstory back and goes, I prepared for this. And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, well, wearing chainmail or plate mail gives me like a -8 or a -12 to swim or whatever it is. It's a catastrophic minus. You sink like a rock. And I go, yeah, that's why you're going to drown. And he goes, but I had my armor enchanted. And I go, when? You've been buying weapons this whole time. He goes, no, I haven't. you guys haven't watched me shop. And of course, between these 5 or 6 games with Delfnar of the Many Thoughts, we didn't watch each other shop, but we would kind of notice when new magic items pop up, like Yenot, Silver Streak of the East, bought the Breastplate of Command, so everybody noticed right away when he showed up with it. Delfnar was not buying new weapons like we assumed that he was, because he was a weapons master. He had just bags and bags of weapons because he's stupid and that's all he does with his money. No. When nobody was looking between these 6 games, Delfnar replaced all of his armor, like his chainmail and his plate mail, with chainmail and plate mail with plus swim on it. And I'm not even sure you can actually do that in 3.5, or if it's like there are certain skills that can't be imprinted onto armor. But again, we were following half the rules and didn't know what we were doing. So at the time, Delfnar had created buoyant armor. He was wearing plate mail that would make him float. So he had like a plus 18 to swim versus the minus 12 because of the weight or the dexterity or whatever that it minuses out. So he had a plus 6 to swim, and he just throws the dice and is like, well, you got above a 10, you bob back up like a freaking buoy in the middle of the ocean. And Delfnar looks up at all his friends. Ha 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 ha! Off the top ropes, Delfnar wins. Ah! And it kisses this arm, and it kisses this arm, and then he just kind of goes with the flow of the river over to the fucking shoreline with this big shit-eating grin on his face. And I was like, God damn it, Delfnar. Yeah! Everybody up on the bridge. Yeah! Delfnar! 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 And of course, this dragon's blood is flowing down into the river, and when it comes in contact with the oxygen and the water and the other things that are in the river catches fire, and it's the most metal thing anybody's ever seen. And Delfnar goes over to one side and he pulls a spike off the dragon's tail as a trophy. He's like, yeah, I have slain the dragon. I have survived the fall. And he climbs all the fucking way back up because it's a 500-foot drop. He gets on the road again, and he goes all the way back up to rejoin his party. And he goes, friends, we have slain the dragon. And, of course, the rest of the column comes up behind them. It's like, our master has been killed. No! And they've cut the head off the snake. So some of them are like, we're free! And they grab an armful of treasure and they run. Or, nobody's paying me anymore. And they grab an armful of treasure and they run. So there's nobody left fighting them anymore, and they get the rest of the dragon's hoard for themselves. And Delfnar, despite being in plate mail, is raised up onto everybody's shoulders, and they give 3 hup hup huzzas for Delfnar of the Many Thoughts. Or rather, the leader of the Mighty Morphin Delfnar Rangers, now that he's got Hans Ramore, Giorgio, and the operator outside of his body. It's awful quiet up here now that he has restored his friends that he knew were there the whole time. He wasn't sure about, maybe his memory was fragmented, or he wasn't sure exactly who was speaking when, but the big reveal for Delfnar that he was 4 people instead of 1. I was like, you pulled this shit out of your ass. He's like, nope, I wrote it down months ago, and I was waiting for the proper boss fight. And, I think he asked Quentin for the repair crystal, like, off to one side. Like, hey, this is what I want to do with this character. Can you make this happen? And then he waited for the proper boss fight to bring out the other Power Rangers that were living in his head. And I go, now we have 3 more heroes to add to our roster. The day is ours. This dragon horde is ours. And, we end up with tens of thousands of gold. Like, nothing is going to top this anytime soon. And we split it amongst, these 8 people. And everybody goes home rich and happy, pretty much. So that was kind of the end of that particular episode. And that's kind of the end of that particular string of episodes. There were other, little one-shots that happened, but none of them were as cool or as epic as these. So Today we will bid farewell to Delfnar of the Many Thoughts, Ye Not, Silver Streak of the East, Light McBrite, Rock and Roll Tony, all the rest, as their string of stories has kind of come to a close. So I hope you enjoyed this episodic mini campaign of weird that had happened. But that was Delfnar's finest hour. I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope you will come back and join me on the next D&D Stories. Keep gaming. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I really love telling D&D stories, and I also really love eating food. So if you'd like to toss a couple of gold pieces into this humble bard's hat, be sure to check out my Patreon. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit the like button as well. And if you'd like access to maps, character art, and channel updates too, check out the D&D Stories Facebook. Keep gaming!